Alright, good morning everyone. So before we start with our morning, I'd like to invite everyone to take a look at our FSS fraternal COVID-19 support. Invite everyone to join us in helping the most vulnerable during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to invite everyone to access our GoFundMe link as shown on the screen. If you have any questions, please contact us through the phone number or our email welcoming@fsscalgary.ca. And I think I'd like to remember everyone as well, next Saturday we have our book club. So what's the book again?
No Mundo Maior.
So the book No Mundo Maior, in a bigger world, if we would free translate it. We will be sending more information on our WhatsApp group about time and links on when and how we're going to do the reflections. Okay, so let's start our text from The Way, the Truth, and the Life by Francisco Cândido Xavier by the Spirit Emmanuel. So text number 40, a time for trust. And he asked them, where is your faith? Luke chapter 8, versicle 25. The storm had troubled the souls of even the strongest disciples. Disoriented before the fury of the elements, they cried out for Jesus' help. The Master does help them, but then asks, where is your faith? This scene suggests some heavy pondering. Jesus' question clearly points out the need for trust when everything seems dark and lost. In such circumstances, faith will rise to the occasion in its own time. If there is a time for working and resting, for sowing and reaping, trust will also show itself at the appropriate hour. Nobody needs to be optimistic when everything is going well. It is difficult to prove one's friendship in moments of happiness. Of course, disciples should expect opportunities for more struggles, times when they can apply the teachings of the Lord more extensively or intensively. Otherwise, it would be impossible to tell just how much they have grown spiritually. During these dolorous times, many invoke direct help from Christ, and help always comes because the heavenly mercy is infinite. But once the difficulty is overcome, there will always be the question, where is your faith? More obstacles will appear until the disciple learns how to serenely control, educate, and overcome himself or herself based on the lessons received. So let's pray. So let's take a deep breath and start our connection with our Father God and our Master Jesus, along with our guardian angels, the spiritual team of our house of FSS. And first, be grateful. Express our gratitude for one more opportunity that we are here to learn a little bit more about Jesus' teachings. Be also grateful for everything that we have in this life, everything that helps us to navigate through the challenges and the storms of our lives. Be thankful for this place, for this house of love that has been helping so many of us in our journey of moral evolvement. And ask God, Jesus our Master, and our guardian angels to guide us in one more hour, to guide us in our reflections, to guide us and leave it open the channel for our intuition, so we can use, even if it's just a little bit of the knowledge, a little bit of the reflections in our lives. Let's wish that we have one more pleasant, serene, calm, and fruitful talk in one more Sunday morning. So be it. All right. So today we're going to talk about trust, and I'll be honest, I did this talk in Portuguese and now in English, and I've been kind of not struggling, but just what's the best word? Is it confidence or is it trust? I think in the end, if we get to the essence of what we would like to show today, it doesn't even matter. But you're going to see an interchange of words between confidence and trust. But the big question is, how have you been exercising your confidence in the face of life's many challenges? And I think it's even more important than ever today, with everything that the world is going, that we stop and think a little bit. How am I exercising this? How am I using the confidence and all the knowledge and everything that we have acquired until this point of our life to navigate and go through this, not only this time, but future times of challenge that we might face in our life? And I think this confidence, as hopefully I will be able to show you how important is to establish this close relationship between us and our Father and our Master Jesus. So the references, as I mentioned when we did in Portuguese, we're going to do a little bit different today. Instead of, we're going to use the same text that I read in our harmonizing beginning of the text, and we're going to go a little bit deeper and try to do some more reflections based on this text called The Golden Rule, from the book The Way, the Truth, and the Life. So I based that on some reflections by Artur Valadares from Fab TV, A Time for Confidence / Trust. There are some passages from the Gospel according to Spiritism. It misses the 2. And another text from Francisco Cândido Xavier called Justiça Divina, or Divine Justice. So some initial reflections. Those reflections, they for sure will start now, but since I've done this talk in Portuguese, I keep reflecting in those questions, and for sure I invite every one of you to start today, but this, as many of our reflections, will continue throughout the day, throughout the week, and throughout our life. So today we would like to reflect how intense or how strong is your connection with your own essence in the face of a challenge that you might face. Another one, what has been your point of view, your reflection, your opinion of the current challenges compared to the future of our immortal spirit? When you put that in perspective, challenge today and the future of the immortal spirit, what reflections do you have? What's your opinion about that? And the third one, have you remembered to reflect on the knowledge and experience you have already gained to overcome a future challenge? Maybe we're all facing a challenge now. Have you stopped and started reflecting, okay, have I ever had something similar? How can I use the knowledge to overcome this challenge now or a future one? So throughout this, let's say 50 more minutes, we will bounce some reflections and try to provide you some insights on how important are those questions and what are some of the thoughts that we are invited to go through and to have in order to keep evolving on those concepts. So as many of you might know, in this series of, that's called the Living Spring Collection from Franciscan Behavior by Emmanuel, there's a text based on one passage from the Gospel. So Emmanuel takes that one passage and describes and gives us the blessing and all the knowledge and how that passage can help us in some of our challenges or in general for our knowledge. And because I love context, when we saw this sentence, "Where is your faith?" he asked the disciples from Luke chapter 8:25. I would like to bring you when when Jesus said that. What was the context that Jesus was along with the disciples? And what happened is Jesus asked the disciples to they were in a lake, and they asked them to jump into a boat and go to the other side of the lake. So there went Jesus and the disciples in that boat, and as they were navigating through the lake, a storm started to happen. And it was a big storm. And all the disciples started to panic and didn't know, and they thought, like, oh my God, we are all gonna die here in this storm. But as they were going, Jesus fell asleep, and they were all by themselves. So as they panicked throughout that storm, they woke up Jesus and saying, "Jesus, help us," because they thought they were going to drown. So Jesus, as he was asleep, he got up and made the storm calm and kind of eliminated, for lack of a better term, of the storm. And then he asked, "Where is your faith?" Through all the disciples. And the disciples were all in awe. And it's like, my God, who is this person that can eliminate and can get rid of the storm? And so the first time I got in contact of this passage, it was more from the perspective of the power, quote unquote, the miracle that Jesus was able to do by getting rid of the storm. But today, I'd like to use this analogy of the storm as the storm that we, as humans or as spirits, go throughout our journey, and how important is to connect to our faith, to the trust in ourselves and our self-confidence. And later, as we progress, I want to, because I really like the analogy made by Arthur when he describes this whole scene of the lake, the boat, to our journey here as an incarnated spirit. So based on that context, where Jesus asks about the faith to the disciples, that they would be able to navigate through that storm, let's go and start with Emmanuel's text about confidence. So he started, "The storm had troubled the souls of even the strongest disciples." And that was a very interesting moment for me personally when I did this talk in Portuguese and now in English. Because in Portuguese, the text doesn't translate directly into soul. It starts with with a word called ânimo. Ânimo. It's interesting because there's no word for ânimo in English, and they translate directly to soul. So that was interesting because Arthur gives a reflection of what does ânimo in Portuguese mean, and that's exactly soul. So it's interesting to see when I went to translate that the translation was directly into soul, and that is the crux of this sentence. Because when we have, what does it mean for us when we have a troubled soul? So a troubled soul is our soul. It's kind of disconnected, but it's disconnected when it's trouble. It's disconnected from what? It's disconnected from even ourselves, from our essence. And when we have a troubled soul, which is disconnected from our essence, what happens? We are a little bit shaken. We lack that confidence that is required for us, not only to go through a storm per se, but to go through the challenges in our life. And then I ask myself, but if the soul is troubled because it's disconnected from our essence, but why? Why do we have troubled souls? Why is it disconnected? And then in the reflection from Arthur, it was very interesting because he says one of the reasons that our soul becomes disconnected is because we are focusing in what is transitory, right? What is things that are just the right now, not only the material, but we forget to spend our efforts and focus in what is eternal. And as we've mentioned here before, we have the two axes, right? We have to take care of in our horizontal part of our life. Those are the transitory pieces that we are invited to do our job here in as incarnated. But we also have the vertical of our life, which, by the way, is the most important because that's the one that will help us to progress as an immortal spirit. So when this disconnection happens from our essence, it's kind of a little bit, it's unbalanced. The horizontal, it's too much into the horizontal and forgetting the vertical part of our existence. And we just put a lot of weight and a lot of effort on that horizontal piece. And he also, there's a sentence he says, sometimes we forget to invest in what is eternal. And what is eternal? It's all the things that are being provided to us to navigate through the storm. But why is that essence and that soul is so important? It's because in our essence, God gave us everything that's required. Everything that's necessary for us to navigate the storm is in here within us. So all the courage, the strength that is required to go through a situation is already here. And so it's so important for us to, what we like to say, watch and pray. If we recognize that if our soul is disconnected, is in trouble, it's like, oops. Let me see what part of my soul is disconnected from my essence. And it's interesting, in Portuguese, there's another passage from Jesus where he says about this troubled soul when he says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble. It's interesting. When I did the lecture about fear, I think it's impossible. In the world that we live in right now, the troubles are part of our evolution. And Jesus says, you will have trouble, but take heart. Or I would maybe change a little bit on the translation. Keep the state of mind. Be careful with the state of your soul. I have overcome the world. So Jesus said he has overcome the world. So we have the strength and what is necessary to overcome the challenges that we might face in this existence. So, very important to maintain this hope, the strength, and the confidence that is required for us to kind of overlap and really give the right importance of what is transitory over what is eternal. And I know sometimes we say, oh, Luis, it's so easy to say this, right? It's easy, just say confidence, I have it. We know it requires a lot of effort. It requires that we have our soul and our state of mind in the right mindset. So if you're facing that, we remember ourselves to connect to our essence. And we know, as Jesus said, there is the peace of the world and Jesus' peace. And we know that the peace of the world is a little bit more fragile, right? As we navigate some turbulent waves, that peace may be a little bit shaken. But we know that the peace of Jesus, the peace of the Lord, is eternal. And it will be there before, during, and after any situation that we might go through. And he continues, disoriented before the fury of the elements, they cried out for Jesus' help. The master does help them, but then asks, so here is the passage, where is your faith? This scene suggests some far-reaching pondering. And that was a good, I really enjoyed the reflection only on that sentence about the scene that suggests some far-reach pondering, because this goes beyond just this passage, but it's about the whole gospel, the richness and the beauty of the gospel study. And we know with all the parables, all the passages, it couldn't be more relevant right now. And as I've seen Artur and other people mentioning, the gospel is imperishable. It's not passive. There's so much action. And I know that there is no recipe, but the gospel gives us all the relevant information, all the necessary information to understand ourselves and know how to reflect and how to face some of the challenges that we face in our existence. And we know of Jesus being our Christ. He knew exactly what was required for him to live in those 30 plus years that will help the whole humanity and all the immortal spirits being incarnated in this earth. Not only what was required at that time, but what is still and will be required for our moral evolution. And I like to say that, use this analogy of the key and the doors, because the reflections of the gospel and with Spiritism that came to help us to shine even more light, to help us understand, is the analogy that I use is the gospel passages are the keys to open a multitude, so many doors that will lead us or it will help us how to navigate the challenges of our lives. So all those parables, those passages, it's all there. It's an invitation for us. The same way, if I have a math problem or if I have any other problem, I go to a book that tells me, oh, when there is this problem, think about this. The gospel right there is something for us to always go through it and use it to face and calm those storms of our lives. So the manual text continues. Jesus' questioning clearly indicates the need to maintain confidence when everything seems obscure and lost. In such circumstances, faith will rise to the occasion in its own time. So if faith will rise if faith will rise to the occasion in its own time, Arthur makes a very good reflection. Everything has its own time, right? There's time for everything. There's time for us to learn X, Y, Z. There's time for us to forgive. There's time for us to be patient. There's time for us to love. There'll always be time, the appropriate time for us to learn something. And we know a little bit of my anxiety, and maybe some of you might feel the same. We want to in our own time, but we know that the time is from God. It's God's time. So we're invited to reflect on that and be aware if something is happening. Let's think about what is that time for, right? And I didn't know about this, but I'm not very aware of the Old Testament yet. But this part of there's time for everything. There's a passage from Ecclesiastes, which I thought was really interesting to bring just a little bit for this talk, where Ecclesiastes says, there is time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born, and a time to die. A time to plant, and a time to uproot. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. And one of the last ones, which I thought was so interesting for our time, a time to embrace or hug, and a time to refrain from embracing, right? We know, especially us from Brazil, we love the physical contact, but there's a time for that physical contact. And now, throughout this difficult time that we're having, there is a time that we can step back a little bit. Even though we know sometimes it's hard, the impulse that we want to hug and we want to express our feelings with our loved ones. But this time and all the troubles, all the storms that we have here, is, as I mentioned, is the characteristics of our material existence. It's our material experience, and we will go through this individually, the troubles and the storms that I face, Luis, individually, and we also, as the law of society, will go through struggles in our whole society, right? Because we evolve ourselves, but our society, as has been evolving, will be shaken and will evolve as well. And all those, if we think about the waves, they oscillate, right? That oscillation, Kardec always talk about that. And he uses a very special word, which is called vicissitudes, which is very similar in Portuguese. So Kardec mentioned in all the books, in the 5 books, a lot about these oscillations, this changing of circumstances that we'll go through, not only mainly here in our material existence, but there are some vicissitudes and oscillations from the spirits as well. But why do we have that? Because that's the only way that we can learn, right? If we don't go through that situation, how am I going to learn what I'm supposed to learn? And using a very simple example, if I want to learn how to drive, if I don't get a car and try driving, how am I going to learn? And with that simple example, it's the same. As we go through the challenges of our lives, it's required. Otherwise, we won't be able to acquire the knowledge. We won't be able to evolve ourselves and develop all the virtues that we came here to develop. So it's important that we give the importance of learning, and we like to say here with the virtue of the apprentice spirit. So that's such an important mindset for us to take in all the situations. So we take out everything that's required out of that. And yep. So here again is that image of the boat, the ocean, the waves. So I want to bring this analogy and see how we can translate that analogy to our life. So our material experience can be represented by the sea. So what is the sea could represent it? What I've just talked. The sea has waves. The waves come up and down. So the waves are all the vicissitudes, all the challenges in our life that we are invited to go through so we can learn. But what about the boat? What could the boat represent in our life? The boat is our body. It's that mechanism. It's that vehicle that we use to navigate all the waves and oscillations. And if we are navigating a lake, a river, what have you, we want to go to point A to point B. Similar here in our existence. We started with something, and now we want to progress. We want to get to a point B, which we want to be a little bit better, right? From where we start. And we know that this journey is not about speed. It's not about who is doing better than someone else. It's all about perseverance. It's all about believing in confidence and trust that we have our own time and we will have as many opportunities to navigate this ocean as required. So we do get to that point B. And in our boat, similar to what happened in that passage, we have Christ. We have Christ as our mentor, as our master, as our advisor, that will, along with our guardian angels, as soon as we are connected, and remember if we be aware, not trouble our soul, so we can be connected to our essence, we can access all that knowledge and all that information. And I would like to put a little bit of another flavor to this analogy about ocean and boats, because we know in the ocean, it's not only us, right? It's not only our boat. We will have thousands and many other boats next to us or surrounding us. And I know, I can speak for myself, sometimes as I'm navigating my boat, I start looking surrounding me to the right or to the left, and I start comparing my boat to the other boat, right? And that attitude, it's not the best one for us, right? Because we start complaining, saying, oh, I wish I had my neighbor's boat, or that boat, or that boat. I would be able to navigate way faster or better. And that causes a lot of frustration, right? So it's important that we remember we have what is necessary in our boat. Whatever boat we have, that's the one. If we believe that God is the primary reason for everything and it's perfect, God gave us the necessary boat, just using this analogy, to navigate. And I remember when I did this in Portuguese, Victor mentioned saying, yeah, makes sense, because sometimes if I start just taking care of my neighbor's boat, I might hit some rocks, right? Or I might deviate my way, my journey, instead of taking care of mine, right? Because I'm just taking care of others' boat. So this comparison is a behavior that we're invited to be aware, and if we caught ourselves in that behavior, we are invited to stop and say, is this the right approach? Should I be focusing on the other? I'm not saying that we should just forget about it. I'm just saying the comparison, right? Am I just complaining and using excuses of why I can't go ahead because others have something different than mine? Can I just be conscious and understand my own capabilities, right? When we talk about the talent parable, we all have the required talents. We all have everything that we need to go through our journey here. And point B is different for me point B, the destination, is different for Carol, is different for Eric, is different from everyone. It would be unfair if I have one boat, another one have a better, let's quote unquote, better boat, and we all have to reach the same destination. That would be unfair. And we know that God is not, God is fair. And so aside of that comparison one, there's another very interesting piece on this passage that says Jesus was sleeping, right? So the disciples went on the boat, started navigating, and Jesus was sleeping. So how can we do a reflection about Jesus sleeping and being that need to be waken up? So symbolically, as I start talking, when the soul is troubled, sometimes due to some distractions that we might have in our life or in our world, we stop paying attention or neglect some noble values of life, right? Some of the virtues that we're invited to develop. And on the most challenging experience, because that Jesus symbolically is sleeping, we disconnect. And that is some of the wake-up call, no pun intended, to awaken. Awaken that Christ inside us. Awaken the essence. So we restore that close relationship and that bond, and we can use that bond with trust and confidence to navigate. So my invitation, try always to be aware to see, is my Christ sleeping in my boat, or is it awakened? If it is sleeping, be aware and awaken, and keep that advisor awakened in our boats of life, our lifeboats, as we navigate. And we know there will be so many storms that we go through. We can go through a storm where we lack some resources, right? It can be material resources, moral resources. We always have something to learn when there is a lack of everything. On the contrary, when we have abundance, there's always an opportunity in abundance too. If you have an abundance of resources, no matter what, material, moral, or whatever, if I have that abundance, maybe it's time for me to dedicate to some project, right? To help, to learn. So there's always, in the two opposites of the spectrum, abundance or lack of something, there is a learning opportunity for us as immortal spirits. If there is a time for working, resting, just continue that piece. There's a time for everything, right? Sowing, reaping, confidence and trust will also show itself at the appropriate hour. Nobody needs to be optimistic when everything is going well. It is difficult to prove one's friendship in moments of happiness. And I remember when I talked about this on the parable of the talents, when we win or we were successful in something, it's rare that we would stop and think, oh, what did I did right that I was successful? But on the contrary, when we maybe fail or did something wrong or mistake, that is such an important time. Not only, it's interesting because it's not only on the moral aspect, but even like in my work, this concept of failing and trying, that's become so prominent, that becomes so important, that if we did something wrong, it's important that we reflect. It's important that we learn from that experience. And we know life is a cycle, right? It's a cycle that we will learn, we'll be successful, and then we make mistakes, we'll learn, and that's the part. And we're invited to embrace that cycle and take the most advantage of it. But one analogy, that when maybe we were in a cycle that that it might be a little bit dark, it might be a little bit obscure, is in this moment that we are going through now with the pandemic. We don't use a flashlight, right, to illuminate during the sun, right? We won't turn on a flashlight if it's clear. We will turn on a flashlight if it's dark, right? Same way that the virtue is just shining light in some dark parts of our existence. So it's important that we reflect and we use and be aware if we are entering a moment of obscureness, of darkness. We remember what type of light have I accumulated in terms of knowledge, in terms of this lecture, of so many other lectures, books that I've read. How can I use that information as light to enlighten whatever dark periods that we might be facing? And that's why I put that question in the beginning, because sometimes we just forget. We get a little bit nervous and anxious that we forget to stop and reflect. What have I learned? What have I been through that can be helpful in this time? Or the gospel. How can I use the gospel as a flashlight, as something that will clear and will shine some light into this path that I'm going right now? So I like this use of our knowledge. And we know that knowledge is just one step, right? We need to know, and then we need to feel and live. But it is a first step. And how can I use that knowledge to start exercising that knowledge in a moment of darkness? And another one that I found so interesting is we can learn with nature, right? As I mentioned about this cycle that we all go through. Nature goes through a cycle. And I think here in Canada, it's even more prominent, or even more not real, but intense, right? Because we know when we are in, for example, summer that we are right now, it's the time that we go out, right? We want to enjoy, and it's the time of all the achievement. But then we have autumn or the fall, where it's like, maybe it's a moment we start to be more closing doors, and we are more on the reflection side of it. But then after fall, we have winter, and then we start complaining about our winter here with the -40 and how challenged that winter might be for us. But there is a reason for that winter as well, right? It's where we go into even more inner reflection. It's not easy to be outside. So it's time for us to be even more prepared to reflect as we are locked in our house in heating, to see what happened in fall, what happened in the summer. And then we have spring again, and that cycle of harvesting and all the fruits that start being available for us. So even with that nature, right, we can take that analogy and see all the times that we go through and the challenges that we go through in our life. And we know, similar to nature, every season has a purpose. Every challenge that we face will have a purpose in our life as well. So here, Arthur brings interesting text that I didn't know, called Divine Justice from Chico Xavier as well, by Emmanuel. Because most of the time, during the storms and the challenges, the pain and suffering is something that is common. But what's the role of that pain and that suffer during those times? And there's a beautiful text that says that pain is an agent of fixation or definition. Because of that agent, the pain exposes us to the true moral physiognomy, what is there, what is shown. Suffering is like a hidden photographer, unravel the most intimate aspects of the personality, placing them in the open. it clarifies the smallest impulses of the heart, leaving them exposed. As we saw, when we are in pain, we take that time to really analyze us a little bit more clear. Sometimes it might take 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, as many times as required for us to click and see what is happening. Why am I going through this? Not only us, as I mentioned, us as me in Luis, but the society. Look at what is happening now, what is happening in the society, and society is taking a step back and thinking, is this the right approach? Is this the right mindset that we should be promoting? So that's that picture, right, that pain poses to us, that like, let's stop and see if I'm suffering or with pain, what is happening. And he continues, and he in this text, and this is it's like an X-ray. So Emmanuel says, as a result, each problem that you are looking for is similar to the work of a directed analysis. Imagine us when we need to analyze something. It is as if we were taking an X-ray of a certain area of your being. I thought that was really interesting. In order to check their balances. Is that right? Is that wrong? Do I need to rebalance this area in my life? And each trial can be compared to a bath of chemicals, testing ideas and feelings to define their sanity. In those moments, we are able to see what needs to be improved, what is well, what doesn't need to change, and what needs to be like totally revamped and changed. And another analogy with the X-ray, imagine doing an X-ray in your boat. And maybe on your boat, before you go into a storm, you have some weights or you have some things in your boat that were making your boat a little bit heavy. And in that time that you're going through your storm, you might need to make your boat a little bit lighter. So through that storm, because of that storm, you start looking, don't need this weight anymore. Let's make this boat a little bit lighter and dispose this. So there's always an opportunity. And this X-ray is so important for us to be mindful and take a look. Am I carrying some dead weights in my boat? Right? Am I putting all my efforts in just on the transitory pieces of my life? And along with those lines, is my Christ sleeping or is that awake? So this whole, that's why I found it interesting, this whole context, it's so interesting. It makes, even for me, clear to understand those moments that I struggle and how to think about that struggle. How is that struggle can show me as an X-ray of myself, of something that I need to take care of, right? And we know with divine mercy, maybe I will have to go through 1,000 storms, but that doesn't matter. It's as many storms as required for me to take that X-ray and take action and try to change whatever is required to change. That is from an individual point of view, but also in society, right? Society is taking a big X-ray right now on is it the values that we should promote? Is that the hedonism? Is that all the materialism? Is that all individualism? Is that the right thing that society should be taking care of? I believe it's not. We are having this opportunity to think about, and as Eric mentioned in some of his lectures, about the fraternity, about charity, about solidarity, which are the values that the Christ promoted, and that we're slowly, but we'll get there. Society will start putting the right amount of value, in importance, maybe it's a better word, into those virtues. And naturally, the disciples await opportunities for greater battles in who will need to apply the Lord's teaching more extensively and intensively. Otherwise, it would be impossible to tell just how much they have gone spiritually. And we know, maybe we have just a rain, it's just a drizzle. Sometimes it will be a big storm. Sometimes it will be a thunderstorm. Sometimes it will be a tornado. Sometimes it will be a hailstorm. Every challenge will have their intensity. And every challenge will require us to use our knowledge and our goodwill to go through it. Maybe it will be a little bit lighter, or maybe it will be a little bit more, it will require a little bit more effort from us. Because it's all about the opportunities that we have to improve. And of course, most of the times, those hailstorms or those tornadoes, some of those will be the ones that we will have a greater knowledge or a greater learning. And we know that in the past, humanity came out of other pandemics and came up with better intellectual knowledge and improved a little bit of the moral challenge that we have as from society. And we know that we have the potential. It's about us being aware of that potential and take the best use of it. And I like to bring the gospel according to Spiritism when we think about just now and what happens in the future, for us to help us with this confidence, right? So the Spirit said, it's the chapter 2 point of view. The clear and precise idea which can be formed of a future life provides an unshakable faith in what is to come. This faith plays enormous consequences upon the moralization of men, because it completely changed the point of view as how to life on earth is regarded. The vicissitudes and tribulations of this life become nothing more than incidents which can be supported with patience, as they are known to be of short duration and will be followed by a more amenable state. I remember one day that Henzo did a lecture when he said, if we take comparison with GPS, we are able to sometimes just see the view of the street, but we know spirits, and as we progress, we'll be able to zoom out and be able to see the greater system and the future, the brilliant future that we all have. And then we'll be able maybe to be more mindful of this is just one point in time. I'm not diminishing that one point in time. It's just to have that perspective that this is one point in time and there will be more in the future. And another passage I would like to bring from Gospel according to Spiritism is passage chapter 5, the evil and its remedy, when Santo Agostinho asks, what remedy can be prescribed for those attacked by cruel obsessions and mortifying evils? And maybe that's not the best translation, but let's say attacked by obsessions, evils, or challenges in life, right? So there is but one infallible way, thorough faith, right? Which is the appeal to heaven. If at the moment of highest roughness in your suffering, you intone hymns to the Lord, and then the angels, such a fan of our guardian angels, at your bedside will show you the sign of salvation. Again, that connection with our essence. And the place which you will one day occupy. Faith is the only sure remedy for suffering. It will always show the infinite horizon before which the few cloudy days of the present will vanish. Again, awaken that Christ in us. Connect with our essence so we can be a little bit more serene if going through a storm. And just finishing the text, in painful times, countless brothers and sisters invoke Christ's direct cooperation. And help always come, because heavenly mercy is infinite. But once the difficulty is overcome, wait for the question, where is your faith? And other obstacles will come, as I mentioned, until the disciple learns to master himself, to educate himself, and to win serenely with the received. And then I'd like to bring Paul of Tarso in a letter to the Romans, when he brilliantly gives a sequence of virtues, of mindsets, when going through our incarnation here. So through whom we have gained access by faith into this grace in which we now stand, and we boast in the hope of the glory of God. Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces patience. So we stand, we have patience, and patience, character, and character, hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured out into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. And then based on that passage, I think I have a cycle here. So we start firmness through believing in God. Those situations, that firmness gives us patience. That patience builds us character. I like what we say here, thick skin, build us experience. That experience gives us hope, which is the child of the light of faith. And then we'll go again. And then we'll go again. And I would just add to that passage one thing called perseverance. As I mentioned, it's not about who goes fast, who gets there first. It's about who perseveres. It's about who keeps consistent and keeps doing the efforts required to learn and to go through some of the challenges of our life. And that's it. 11:57. Thank you, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Questions?
No questions. There's just one comment from Eric in the middle of your talk.
Mm-hmm.
So he was quoting Joana de Angelis in the book Momentos de Meditação. So she tells us, the most difficult battle to be fought occurs in your intimate world.
Yeah.
Nobody sees it, applauds it, or censors it. It's yours. Victory or defeat will belong to you in silence.
Yeah. Beautiful.
No outside help can contribute to your success, or any situation will lead to failure.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting, right? Even now that we just talked about some of the storms that everybody might be facing, but there's always a lot of the storms that we face internally, right? And we are the only audience, let's say, of that battle. Thank you, Eric. All right. Let's go to a final prayer. So again, let's raise our thoughts. Let's connect to our essence. Let's balance our soul, our mind, our heart, our conscience, and connect that with our Lord, with our Father God and Jesus. And ask them, our guardian spirits, guardian angels, to help us to be aware. If our Christ is not awakened, that we are able to identify and start connecting with our Christ inside of us, connecting with our essence, so we can have all the tools, all the resources, and everything that's required to go through some of the storms, some of the battles in the world and inside of us. Let's be grateful for one more time that we learn a little bit. Be grateful for this house. Be grateful for the opportunity. Be grateful for all this world that we live in, for our boat, for our body, for all the experience that we are invited to go through, so we can learn, so we can progress. Let's wish for one more Sunday, hopefully with sun, that we can accumulate not only knowledge, but how do we feel that knowledge? How do we live that knowledge? And when there's times where there's dark, we can shine that light. we can bring a little bit of light to that trouble moment so we can learn with it and we can go through with it. As our spirits from FSS, that this house of love, continue to be blessed. That this house continue to be the light, not only here for Calgary, but for Alberta and for Canada. May we have another blessed Sunday and another blessed week. So be it. Quiser respondendo, Chiquinho?
Nessa vida.